good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are having a great time at Cypher 2024. My name is Venkatesh Mahale. I'm a senior research manager at Technology Holdings. I'll be hosting this panel discussion, as we said, and then we'll be discussing about something that has been creating a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz, and a little bit of anxiety. That is generative AI or GenAI, as we call it. So will GenAI will it be a $118 billion market opportunity as everybody is thinking, or is it going to be a threat, perceived as a threat to the traditional ways of doing business, right? And what it actually really means to the industries like IT services, software, BPOs, and healthcare for that matter. So now before we dive into the discussion, let's just have a quick show of hands. How many of you are actually or currently using GenAI tools in your daily operations on a day-to-day basis, or for that matter on a fairly regular basis? That's quite a good number. Hopefully, by end of this session, right, everybody will be able to take something back to their teams. Joining me today are the two industry experts who are deep into their trenches to this ongoing AI revolution. Welcome, Sriharsha, and welcome, Anant.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I hope both bring invaluable experience in how GenAI is not just changing the industries, but also shaping the future. So before we kick off, let me give you a brief, a little background on our work. Technology Holdings is an investment bank, providing merger and acquisitions advisory, growth advisory, as well as consulting exclusively to IT services, BPO, as well as software and healthcare companies globally. So and also we recently completed a survey, which actually talked about mostly the impact of GenAI in IT services and software and BPO companies. So we gathered a lot of insights from the industry leaders, in these areas, where on how they are actually navigating the GenAI landscape. So so before just to give you some quick highlights, 90 of this survey, right? 91% of respondents believe GenAI significantly boosts employee productivity, and 82% see enhanced customer experiences through GenAI integration. And in the BPO sector especially, GenAI is expected to have the biggest impact, especially when it comes to automation and advanced analytics. So based on these insights, let's dive deep into this, GenAI, how this GenAI is impacting the industry. So let's start with IT services, Sriharsha, and with GenAI rapidly influencing the IT services sector, what do you see as the most transformative technological advancement? How are these changes reshaping the landscape of IT services, particularly in client offerings?
Sure. No, thanks, Venkatesh. Let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers for having me on this panel, Anant as well. So I manage two portfolios at Technology Holdings. So I'm an associate director. I manage the buy side, so wherein we enable significant enterprise value accretion for private equities, funds, portfolio companies, and strategics to do programmatic acquisitions and buy and build to scale faster. When I say scale, it's a combination of revenue, operating leverage, and eventually enterprise value. And the second piece, coincidentally, is I also manage the CX AI analytics sell-side practice, wherein we try to do growth fundraise as well as do exits in terms of strategic or PE buyouts, right? So, and fundamentally have spent 12 years doing 20+ acquisitions. So I used to lead strategy M&A for a leading BPM called WNS Global Services for close to 9 years. and a SoftBank-backed CX tech company in the Middle East for close to 2 years, right? And that gives me some sort of credibility to answer this and some of the questions to follow. Just to take a step back before talking about IT services, just to set the context, right? So broadly, some of the, I mean, just to tell a quick story, right? So broadly, what's happening is everybody knows about NVIDIA, right? So 3 trillion market cap, 120 billion in revenue, right? So roughly trading 25 times revenue. They're growing at 100, 150% year on year, right? And a part of what they do is GenAI, but about 85% of the data center and chip work they do is AI, right? As far as the company claims to be, right? And we all know how they have aced into, in fact, the market cap has 7 or 8x in the last 2.5 years, as we all know, right? But on the tail on the other side has been, if you look at Intel does roughly half of their revenue. Again, 25% or 30% of the revenue is AI, if not Gen AI, but they are 100 billion market cap, which is 3% of where NVIDIA is, right? I mean, this clearly tells how much of a transformation and the market shift that has happened over the last 24 to 36 months, especially after the launch of ChatGPT, Gemini, and the following models, right? So specifically taking this question on IT services, I mean, just another data point, right? So nobody used to disclose even AI revenues, right, in the IT services industry. So IT services roughly today is about $1.5 trillion in revenue, which is expected to double in the next 8 to 10 years, right? So Accenture, which is the leader, number 1, number 2 IT services company in the world, they started disclosing GenAI revenues, right? And their GenAI pipeline is already $2.5 billion run rate for the year, right? So from about couple of 100 million last year, the pipeline has, I would say, scaled 300, 400%, right? I mean, so that makes us to believe strongly that GenAI is real, right? I mean, one, the example of data center and chip companies, which is on the upstream, who is creating the GenAI infrastructure, and IT services probably on the downstream, who is seeing a lot of traction and order book building, right? So in terms of the impact on IT services, there's a lot of impact, right? I think a lot of developers are questioning the relevance of GenAI adoption in their work, as far as the relevance in their roles as well, right? I mean, how much of their work will be automated, or will their roles be relevant, right? So I think it's become a fundamental question on them. In terms of specific areas within IT services, we'll deep dive further, but just at a broad level, there's a lot of impact on testing, debugging, DevOps, MLOps, right? Data ops, right? I mean, these are the few areas which are seeing significant impacts of GenAI, both positively and negatively.
Thank you. Shreyas, it is clear that GenAI is driving significant innovation in IT services. Now, if we focus slightly, the healthcare sector is also seeing profound impact, right, from this advancement. So, Anant, when we think of AI, it's, we often picture robots performing surgeries, or diagnosing patients. But we know that GenAI is doing some subtler role as well. So where do you see it making that biggest impact in is it in diagnostics or treatment or something else completely different?
Yeah. So thanks, Venki, and pleasure to be on this panel. I look at healthcare life sciences at TH Healthcare, which is a subset of Technology Holdings. So GenAI honestly has been a game changer for healthcare industry, right? In some of the sectors specifically, because healthcare, as you would know, is as traditional as it gets, right? But let's say for drug discovery, for example, right, especially in lab trials, where there are hundreds and thousands of combinations that you need to go through to probably perfect the one novel drug that you are looking at, which takes typically 9 to 12 months. GenAI can narrow that 100,000 combinations into, let's say, 10, 15 combination, and can do that in, let's say, a few months. And instead of focusing probably on those 1,000 combinations manually, you can now focus on only 10 of them, which end-to-end lab trial, which initially used to take 9 to 12 months, can now reduce to 3 months using GenAI. And a lot of these novel drug discovery companies across Asia, across US, even big pharma like Pfizer, Merck, everyone has started using it now, and people are seeing the benefits of not only saving time but also saving effort, saving cost as well, right? Because instead of having a scientist work on it for 12 months, you can have a computer do it for a few months and then perfect on those 10, 12 molecules, which will eventually lead to, animal trials and human trials going ahead. That's probably one of the biggest changes that we are seeing using GenAI in healthcare. Second, obviously, Amazon. All of us know that Amazon does, pharmacies all across the globe, right? Amazon is using GenAI incrementally a lot in its pharmacy business, where it's starting to predict, which type of drug will be required at what particular point of time in which particular area, to figuring out, let's say, summaries of the prescription, and chatbots giving out predictive analysis on drugs that probably the patient need. Also figuring out what is the supply chain requirement for that particular drug in different markets. So these are let's say few areas that probably healthcare is seeing a lot of traction. Obviously, it will take time for, let's say, GenAI to go from lab trials to animal trial to clinical trials, because there is a lot of data privacy issues and all of that in place. But I think slowly the adoption in a more traditional industry like healthcare is also going up substantially, and it's only for the better.
Thank you, Anand. Let's talk about internal operations, Sriharsha. How are companies leveraging GenAI to improve internal efficiencies, right? Could you share any real life examples, where it's creating a lot of opportunities within IT services or BPO firms?
Yeah, no, let me give an example rather than being very generic, right, Venkatesh? So in my previous setup at WNS, I happened to enable CFO transformation, right? So what do we mean by that is, one of the primary tasks of a chief treasury function, which is a combination of, like I said, GenAI, chief treasury function, which is a combination of, like I said, GenAI, AI, as well as let's say Power BI of Microsoft, right? I think all of these led to a significant improvement in the working capital cycle, right? And even if you look at treasury gains, right, today the head of treasury probably will have to look at things manually. So imagine a large enterprise which has 50 entries across 20 countries, right? So and there are various needs of cash and capital everywhere, right? So where do you source capital from? How do you use them? Where do you deploy them, right? So combination of GenAI and AI can shoot wonders, right? So we implemented all of these to see significant values, and that's only within the CFO organization, right? And we at TH cover the CFO tech very, very broadly, right? And similarly, if you look at HR, procurement and various functions, right? Just take an example of procurement, right? I mean, vendor management, right? I mean, you can have significantly better vendor management and vendor interactions if you enable GenAI, right? Rather than the traditional emailing and calling that goes on, right?
Right.
And likewise in HR tech, right? I mean, so I think we are out of the world wherein we were sending a mail to the HR and accessing a report or getting a query on any particular question, right? Today, all of the policies are, if digitized well, you could have employees access a query engine and then get immediate responses, right? On anything and everything you want about your policies, right? I think these are some of the use cases where we are seeing significant productivity enhancements.
Right. Thank you, Sriharsha. I mean, it's fascinating to see how these technologies are being integrated deeply into the business operations. So Anant, in healthcare, how are organizations using GenAI to enhance the internal operations?
Yeah, so see, if you look at healthcare, right, healthcare is broadly two parts, right? There is, pharma, and then there is healthcare delivery, right? In a healthcare delivery, we all know there's a dearth of doctors, there's a dearth of, nurses, right, in India in general. So what GenAI is now doing is that, so let's say I'm a patient, I go into a hospital, right, and I have my medical history and all of that in place. The GenAI, what it will do is it will look at my medical records, try to figure out what was the issues in the past and what I'm facing now. It will create a summary of all of that, and then it will just give it to the nurse to read that up, do the initial bit of treatment for the OPD, and then the doctor can take it from there. So instead of, let's say, nurses going through tons of paperwork, which used to take probably 10-15 minutes to do it, GenAI will create a summary, do it in, let's say, less than a minute, give it to the nurse, and the nurse, instead of taking 10 minutes, now takes, let's say, 1 minute to analyze what you have done, what's your medical history in the past, and then recommends the initial course of treatment to you in the beginning while the doctor comes in. Another way, where GenAI is helping is that, all of these chatbots, right, and we've seen so many of them, right, but some of, the companies in India, what they are also trying to do is, these chatbots will now have, let's say, voice modulations in place, will have your past documents in place, and when you log into your account using your username and password, what it will quickly do is, it will go about, check your medical records, see the voice modulation. If it's you, it will immediately start recommending the next course of treatment without even, let's say, waiting for a doctor or a physical person to do it for you. So it can recommend the initial course of treatment, while obviously the doctor comes in. If there is a serious thing, obviously the doctor comes in, but at least in let's say basic cold and flu and stuff like that, the GenAI can at least tell you, okay, you have a cold, why don't you start with a Calpol while the doctor comes in, or you get an appointment for tomorrow. Imagine you're facing this at 2 a.m. in the night, probably the doctor is not available immediately, but with this at least you can start your treatment, while obviously it can enhance, or you can change the treatment in the morning or the day after when you actually see a doctor. And the same is happening across pharmacies, diagnostics also.
Let's definitely you're right. I mean, it definitely enhances the patient experience end of the day, right? So so moving, let's shift gears to the BPO sector. It's always been a critical part of IT services ecosystem, but GenAI seems to be shaking it up, right? On M&A front, we have seen increased activity in the BPO. Shriharsha, you have seen these changes firsthand yourself. What's really happening? Are we seeing real results, or is this just another trend that will probably fizzle out in the little?
No, absolutely. No, thanks for that. So, I mean, just one of the interesting acquisitions which I did as a buyer in the past, right? So, and this happened to be 6 weeks before the ChatGPT was launched, coincidentally, right? And people, even my board, realized the value of this acquisition after the launch of ChatGPT, saying there are umpteen number of use cases possible, right? So what this company did was automating and enhancing contact center, right? Which fits right into the heart of BPM, right? So traditionally the call center, let's say if you need 100 people, through a combination of chat, email, voice and video, right? And AI and GenAI sitting in the back end. So they automate 70% of the calls, right? And the remaining 30%, which are handled by agents, they make them so efficient and productive that it can be handled by 30% less agent. So your starting conundrum was you were managing the operations with 100 people, it's turning out to be 20 people, right? So call center probably is seeing the most significant impact from a BPO point of view, which is downstream in the spectrum, right? The most upstream in the spectrum is probably industry specific, right? So let's say, for example, we at TH also do a lot of transactions. We have done about 30 transactions in M&A alone, only for banking, only in banking, financial services and insurance, right? So probably some of the companies who are servicing, let's say operating in claims or underwriting or these operations, even for a BPO, are relatively shielded compared to the contact center piece. But over here, a lot of productivity benefits are being seen, right? Wherein you have GenAI and AI at large, and then you're managing the operations much faster with higher efficiencies.
Anand, how about in the healthcare,
So, so we're currently working with a company which does, raising funds for a company that, reverses, type 2 diabetes, right? And again, a lot of the curriculum that they have designed, right, is also because they've gone through, let's say, 50,000 patients now, and there are 120 million people that suffer with diabetes globally. And out of these 50,000 patients, they have created created a curriculum out of all the data that they have used, right? And they are using machine learning, AI, to figure out the perfect curriculum, let's say, to reverse these type 2 diabetes, right? And it's a game changer for them. And we are in the process of helping them raise funds for the next round and grow globally now. So again, these are very, very differentiated approaches which probably healthcare as an industry would have never thought 5-7 years back. But as Harsha said, with the onset of ChatGPT and stuff like that, people have realized that there is a bigger disruption out there, and healthcare is an industry which is short of people, right? We are a population of 1.4 billion, but still there is a dearth of quality healthcare professionals in the country. So I think with with generative AI, machine learning, right? People have now started realizing not only does it save cost, but it also saves critical manpower, which can be utilized in different other fields. So I think it's a transformational change for the industry in general.
Yeah. So thank you both for sharing great insights into the evolving role of GenAI in the BPO and healthcare. Now let's talk about M&A trends, right? Which is the bread and butter for technology holdings. Shreyas and Anant, what trends are you noticing in deal activity, especially in IT services and BPO? Are private equity and corporate buyers responding differently?
Well, I'll pick that up first. Thanks, Venkatesh. So just to again talk some numbers, right? So 2023 was probably a blockbuster year in funding and investments, right, in GenAI. So if I'm not wrong, there was $20 to $25 billion of fund infused, thanks to ChatGPT, Anthropic, and a few other companies, right? I mean, wherein the biggies like Microsoft, Amazon came into the foray, right? But if you exclude all those one-off infrastructure investments, there is a recurring 3 to 5 billion of fund getting flown into GenAI every quarter, right? And that's the size we are talking, right? And this is only the private equity and venture capital funding, right? So M&A again has started to pick up, right? If you look at the number of acquisitions on, if you Google virtual assistant transactions, ChatGPT transactions, you'll see a few transactions every quarter, right? Every company doing that, right? And this is not only for IT services, but even for BPO to embed these technologies into industry-specific capabilities. Some of them are embedding these capabilities into the data and ML ops. Some of them into the contact center practices, right? So there is a lot of activity, right? Specifically from an India point of view, so I think if I'm not wrong, we have not raised more than $500 million funds till date on GenAI, right? But the starking difference is the last year, 12 months alone saw about $250 million plus kind of funding in GenAI, right? And if I look at NASSCOM stats, right, there are about 70 to 80 native GenAI startups, right? And a few of them have got funded, right? So this trend is picking up, right? From nowhere to a 300 million funding in the last year only for GenAI is budding, and this has mostly been on LLMs, right? And data center is something new for India, right? If you look at now, all the big enterprises and external investors are focusing on data centers, right? So now if all of those money comes into data centers and software and services, it could go into a few billion in the few quarters.
And Anand, what is your perspective on M&A in the healthcare side?
So in healthcare, I think the two most advanced sectors that are seeing M&A activity with respect to Gen AI is one is biotech. There are a lot of companies in India who started doing novel drug discovery work with all of these large pharmaceutical companies, big pharma as we call them. They are seeing increased funding, increased traction from investors globally, and obviously this becomes a global phenomenon now because you're making something from India for the world now, using pharma. And the second is pharmacies, right? I mean, Amazon has been doing it globally. In India, there are a couple of companies that we know are doing similar stuff globally at a very nascent stage, obviously, because healthcare as an industry is more traditional. It's slow to adopt all of these new changes, but we are now. So pharmacy is seeing a lot of traction by this, but yeah, I think those are the two immediate pillars of focus for the industry.
Yeah. So recently I read a article in AIM, which says in the end, all startups will be acquired. So what are your thoughts on that?
Is this for me, Venkatesh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, both anybody wants to.
Cool, so I can chip in first. I mean, fundamentally, Anant and I are, and TH is an M&A enabling ecosystem organization, right? So just to give you an example, right? So a year back when the NVIDIA price buzz started, right, in the stock market, people were valuing it on revenue and so many other metrics, right? So finally, people are using discounting cash flows and predicting how much of a cash NVIDIA will make 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, and they're trying to see realistically what would be the valuation, right? So when things spike up like this, right? For example, similar thing happens when internet spiked, right? The dot-com bubble happened. SaaS picked up, right? So there would be a period of 1, 2, 3 years wherein there will be irrational exuberance in terms of how companies are getting treated, but the fundamentals of business doesn't change, right? So effectively, the sustainability and the growth of the cash flows, free cash flow rather, over the longer term is what will bring in enterprise value, right? Otherwise, you have, for example, just to give you an example in a very similar space, right? Look at what has happened to SMCI, right? So data center space, very, very hot, right? I mean, they pretty much rode the NVIDIA wave, but just because of a regulatory glitch and there was an issue regarding revenue recognition, which is probably one of the fundamental principles of running a business, and the whole market price tanked, right? So I think it's to create quick value. I think it's possible in the shorter run, but the long-term sustainability of cash flows and the growth, which eventually because of various parameters, right? It depends on your market share, ability to maintain the market share, right? How much customers love your product, right? I mean, all of these fundamental factors will eventually lead to cash flows, and that will drive the valuation of your business.
Your perspective on that?
So, healthcare obviously has seen a lot of healthcare companies in the last 5 years, right, post-COVID. While the valuations were off the roof for most of them over the last 5-7 years, but you have to also realize that all of these companies will eventually have to fold into and create a larger organization, because there is a lot of white space. For example, in pharmacy, still whatever 70% of the business is still unorganized, right? But you still cannot have 10 large scale startups running in parallel. So probably you will have mergers. I've done mergers for a lot of these companies already in previous organizations, but honestly, you're right, a lot of these companies will get acquired, will get rolled up into into larger organizations. I even see traditional healthcare companies now venturing into newer technologies and all of that. Some of them have started acquiring companies in that space. So eventually it's only the way to go.
Thank you again. I mean, it's clear that acquisitions are becoming a clear strategy for companies looking to fast track their GenAI capabilities and adapt this new wave of technological advancement. So, but while M&A helps companies quickly grow quickly, it's just one part of the puzzle, right? I mean, looking ahead, the real challenge will be understanding the long-term impact of GenAI. So, Shreyash and Anant again, what do you see as the potential long-term impacts of GenAI on the, again, IT services and BPO sector? What new business models or service offerings do you anticipate emerging as GenAI continues to evolve?
Sure, thanks for that question, Venkatesh. I'll go first again. So, I mean, just to give you a sense of where TH comes into AI and GenAI, so we have closed a dozen of transactions in these spaces and running half a dozen of active mandates as we speak. So there's a lot of interest from both funds as well as strategics to invest in these businesses, right? So as of now, it is niche, right? And people who are selective and people who are calibrated will do well, right? So it doesn't make sense to burn a lot of cash and become the first mover, right, into a particular space and just do for the sake of doing it, right? So I think the segments, so it will impact everything, right? But there will be a sequence of events, Venkatesh, right? For example, the infrastructure in terms of data centers will get impacted first, right? When we have already seen so much of what's happening with the companies we spoke about, right? And then that will eventually flow into cloud ecosystems, that will flow in and again flow into software, and then services, and then BPO, right? So that's a natural flow of how technology happens, right? So the disruption would flow in that stream, but it will be across the board in all of these sectors. Some sector eventually will get impacted more, some sector less, but the relevance of business models have already been questioned, right? Like for example, a manual contact center is already being questioned in a BPO, for example, right? In IT services, testing, debugging is already being questioned, right? So like that, certain parts of the value chain will be fundamentally questioned and disrupted.
Yeah. Anand, how about healthcare? So
in healthcare, obviously, I think it's a positive disruption that's happening, right, and waiting to happen. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So for example, in let's say diagnostics, right, lab or radiology, instead of let's say you having the radiologist or the pathologist looking at the report, reading each and every report, because that's how it happens even now in most of the diagnostic companies. You can have GenAI, feed the GenAI with a certain set of program that it has to read these reports, figure out, let's say the outcomes that are there, and create a summary out of it. That's exactly the job of the radiologist and the laboratory guys, right? But if that work can be reduced from doing, let's say, 20 in a day by one guy to, let's say, 100 in a day, because now all the person has to do is figure out, quickly glance through if it's in line and all of that, and then publish the report. This creates efficiency that also reduces for the patients, right? Second, and again, Amazon is the leader in all this, right? Globally, what they are doing is that they have created a prescription which says the drugs, the dose, and the weightage of the drug, right? The potency of the power of the drug. If those three are aligned in a perfect way in the prescription, what GenAI can do is it actually can read the report prescription immediately and start sending you the medicines immediately. Obviously, there will be a pharmacist and all of that looking at the report, but in the end, again, the turnaround time reduces drastically for everyone, because you now have someone error checking the report in the initial phases, and if the numbers are off the mark, obviously the pharmacist will review it manually. But let's say if 90% of the work is done by GenAI, it means that I have lesser resources to play with. It saves me cost, saves me time, and better fulfilling of pharmacy and drugs for the patients.
Yeah, great insights. And as we can see, the opportunities are massive, but they also come with a lot of strategic decisions. This brings to our last final question. So, what strategic advice would you offer to organizations looking to enhance, GenAI? How should they, balance immediate implementation and with long-term, planning to ensure, sustained success?
Thanks for the question, Venkatesh. So, I think the parameters remain very simple, right? Before any tech implementation, whatever criteria is looked at, be it ROI, time to effective value creation, value addition, how effectively it could be integrated, how much it flows seamlessly into your existing tech ecosystem. These are the fundamentals you would look at before implementing any new tech. So GenAI is also very, very similar, right? But I think in terms of how quickly to adopt and embrace the change, I think organic and inorganic interventions are absolutely required, right? I'm talking from a perspective of a buyer, right, as well as from a perspective of an M&A investment bank, right? So, quick inorganic interventions in the right areas, which impacts your customer demand as well as internal productivity, is very much required, right? Because especially like a few pockets we have been discussing, right? I mean, you can't wait for them to be disrupted and your revenues to get cannibalized by somebody else, right? So, it's better to you yourself cannibalize a portion of revenue in the short term to create a larger long-term sustainable value.
Anant, your thoughts on that?
See, I think broadly what Harsha said, right? I mean, healthcare is not a sector that will have a lot of GenAI investment by themselves, but it will take help of IT sector to do that. But obviously, there will be people like Amazon, Pfizer, Merck's of the world that invest in that, because those are more proprietary stuff, those are more confidential stuff that they have to do. But in general, I think it will be a combination of where new age companies from IT, technology, software supports healthcare in achieving that next level of efficiency growth for everyone.
Well, that wraps up our discussion. Thank you both for your invaluable insights today. And it's clear that GenAI is transforming how we work across industries, and I'm sure many in the audience will take away some actionable ideas from here today. And also, I would like to remind everyone that we are launching our latest report on GenAI, how the impact, what GenAI actually means for IT services, BPO, and software companies. What is it a threat or an opportunity for these companies? So please log into our website, www.technologyholdings.com, and you can download the report from there. So thank you.